And greetings. Whoa. Wrong audio setting. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. This is not going to be a traditional show. We're just going to shoot the breeze. Eric Jewell and I met for the very first time on Modern Day Debate. I never met him before. And what happened was I was, I was, uh, James Coons, the owner of Modern Day Debate, came out and wrote to me and said, Sal, I need a debate partner for Eric. And I'm like, okay, James, you're my friend. I'll do you a favor. And that's how I usually ended up with debate partners. And so there was no idea who was going to be. I had no idea how that was going to transpire. And so that's the first time we met. I was very moved by Eric here, who goes by Hot Topics Bible Study and Debate. I was very moved by the fact that Eric had a breathing tube to assist him, and he was my debate partner. And I respected that because my father himself, toward the end of his life, had to wear a breathing tube. In his weakened condition, he still took care of our family. So that's how we met. So Eric, would you be willing to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, because now it's a chance for us to meet each other really and get to know each other. So that's what I was hoping we would do tonight.
Well, thank you for showing the interest to get to know me. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for being my debate partner there too. I know we never had a chance to get together before the debate, and that's sad. It would have been nice to be able to, but it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. But I was glad to engage with you. Of course, neither one of us knew from what angles we were going to approach anything. But it was an enjoyable debate, and I was very happy to meet you, make your acquaintance, and I was also very impressed with the fact that you have actual papers that have been peer reviewed, and you've submitted these papers and been published in a journal. That's excellent stuff. But I love serving the Lord. I can't say that my every step with the Lord has been in righteousness, because I would be lying, brother, and lying is a sin. But I can say that He's my Savior, and I try to combat the flesh. I do try to serve God to the best of my ability. I think that the evidences for God are just massive. I really don't know why some people have a problem with other people who believe in God just because they believe in God. But I also believe that God is beyond something that can just be believed in. God is knowable, in my opinion. Not that we could ever know His depth, but we can know Him. That's the personal relationship thing. And that's something many people that are skeptical don't understand. We don't just believe in God. Some of us actually have a relationship with God. And then I find too, I've studied when I came to the Lord at a very young age. I was like 6 years old, but I was convicted of my sins. I knew I was a sinner. I asked the Lord to enter my life. But then every step of the way too, I've been trying to work to understand how God did things. What did He say in His Word? Can we trust His Word? I believe we can trust it 100%, even where we may not exactly want to. But we can. His Word is true. And my endeavors in life, as far as science is concerned, I came into this not having a dog in the race. I didn't know whether evolution were true or not. I gave credence that it may have been possible, but I sought it out. And the one thing that I learned after many, many, many years of study is that the so-called facts of evolution are just blown way out of sight. And the truth is, when they're forced to come down to the scientific method, there's well, there is no scientific method that's been applied to evolution, so to speak, when it comes to the many so-called quote unquote evidences for it. So my endeavor, before I show my side of the story, the creation side, and give the evidence for that, I like to show that the atheist really has not a thing to stand on when it comes to evolution. Everything that they try to tell us is a fact and backed up is in fact not even testable in many cases, like the alleged transitional fossils. Um, Dr. Colin Patterson, I like to quote him. He said he was an evolutionist, scientist, senior paleontologist for the British Museum of Natural History, went on tours lecturing for evolution. And he came right out and said, regarding the lack of transitional fossils in his book on evolution, he said, well, such things are not part of science. It's easy enough to suggest and guess why this form may have given rise to this other form, but there's no way to put it to the test. Transitional fossils are not even a part of science. They're not science at all. It's science fiction. It's because you can't test whether the Archaeopteryx, for instance, was descended from a theropod dinosaur. You don't have the DNA of the theropod dinosaur or the Archaeopteryx, so there's no way to test it. And we get all kinds of pushback on that, but it comes right down to, is this testable? And no, it's not. And it's that way with all kinds of their observations. Their other observation, for instance, are ERVs stored in the same place with chimps and human DNA. But all that proves is that we have specific areas in DNA that are set aside for storing specific things. That's the only thing in the world that proves. And again, to say we have a common ancestor, that's fine if they want to hypothesize that. But there's no way to put that to the test because you can't test the DNA of a common ancestor. And so what I try to do, first of all, is to show that evolutionists, all they have is a lot of spin. Um, there is, as they have to doctor the definition of species in order to give the illusion of evolution where there is none. So, like for instance, with Neanderthals, we fit the biological definition of species, and we share that with the Neanderthal and the Denisovan. And yet, we have the DNA proving that we all interbred and produced fertile offspring. But yet, they won't tell you why we're not classified as the same species. And as far as I've been able to study this, there's many types of birds that are like this, dogs and gray wolves and coyotes should all be the same species, and yet coyotes are put in a different species. So I do try. I think doing your due diligence is good, and then trying to make them, hold their feet to the fire. Ask them why they can't test this, and why they're calling untestable hypotheses facts. But I think we have a lot to brag about when it comes to God, Sal. I really do, because God is consistent with several lines of science that all point to a creator, the need for a creator. And I think science in its pure form is a beautiful and wonderful thing because it all points to God. It really does. So I don't want to go on, brother. That's me in a nutshell. Concerning my health, I've got like stage 4 COPD. I've got several heart conditions. May of 2021, I was hospitalized And there were 4 doctors that didn't believe I would come out of the hospital, Sal. But here I am over a year later, and God is very good. He gives me each day fresh, anew, that I get to spend with my loved ones and friends, and lift up His name, for which I'm proud and happy for every day.
Well, thank you very much. I was very inspired by your courage. Um, I want to tell the viewers there, because they're people that are very, they're very, uh, they feel very strongly about theological views. I'm an evangelical Christian. I was raised in um, first the Catholic faith and then the Reformed faith. I'm just going to tell the viewers, I entertain people here on this channel that have a huge spectrum of views, all the way from atheist to whatever. And so we definitely may not agree. And I'm not going to have a channel, uh, that tries to explore just different viewpoints if I didn't admit them every now and then. So Kevin's biblical discussions. Um, he confronted me here. He said he claims that he said Eric believes that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are three separate Elohim. He is a polytheist. You don't have to. I'm sorry.
I was kind of laughing. Yeah, my brother Kevin has a problem with me, and it stems back to, if anybody goes to my channel on YouTube, uh, you can see you're going to be greeted with a particular uh, piece of video that was my debate with partly was my debate with a fellow named Graham, and Graham is evidently Kevin's teacher.
Okay.
But he calls me every name in the book, just ungodly sort of stuff, man. I
Okay.
have
Well, we don't have to go there, brother. I'm just going to let everyone know I avoid theological disputes on this channel a lot, and I try to focus on more basal things like science, and because I don't want, I really have, um, I try to keep a low drama channel, and I just wanted to thank you for the courage you displayed on modern day debate.
well, thank you, thank you. I
And
would like, I would like to offer Kevin one thing, because Kevin, I consider you a brother. I really do. Uh, Anytime you would like to really hear this out about the Trinity and what does the Scripture say about the Trinity, um, I would be happy to go over it with you on anybody's channel, and we can let them moderate. Brother Bill, Brother Andy, it doesn't matter. And I really hope you do. I have nothing against you. With that being said, God bless you.
and I got to tell you, there, because of my professional relationships, I have people of all faiths that I have to deal with. I don't profess their faith, but our common bond often is science, because I have to deal with a lot of scientists that are not young earth creationists for sure.
Yes.
When Dr. Sanford sent me off to study young earth creationism, he sent me to learn it from evolutionists. So you just have to learn to be able to interact with people and not always be confrontational, because I could go around and everyone I disagree with just call them heretics, and even if I may feel that personally, it's like, okay, I could do that, but you know I'll let other people do that. I have to try to engage. My mission is to engage the evolutionary thing. There are plenty of Bible teachers out there. There are not many scientists,
Yes.
and that's what I have to be really good at. And it is so hard for a young earth creationist to get published in secular peer review. It is so hard. There's so few of us that do this. I
That's a fact.
that's
It's hard for an older creationist to get published.
Yeah, it was a miracle, and I'm still kind of under the gun, and I worry sometimes some of my publications will get retracted. and so I don't talk about them too much. But you know, the nice thing is there are more and more journals. So what I was hoping we could maybe talk about is how did James, let's talk about modern day debate. That's what if you don't have any problem talking about,
Not at
the,
all.
so how did you get recruited for modern day debate? How did you and James get in touch, and how did that debate happen in the first place?
Well, I've got a friend named Samuel, and hello, Samuel, if you're listening. And he and I were on in several different groups on Facebook, and he was also one of my subscribers, and he's seen me discuss and debate evolution and transitional fossils and etc. on Facebook, and so he suggested that I go to Modern Day Debate, and he actually contacted James for me, and it's been a couple of months, but finally he wrote me back and wanted me to come on, so I agreed to. But the one thing that I was hoping would happen that wouldn't would that I could pursue a couple lines of questioning and thought and hold their feet to the fire a little bit more. But there were a few things, well, several things I wasn't actually allowed to bring out, but didn't have time for it. But I was grateful for the time that we did have, and I think overall a lot was proven that night. Um, I don't think any of the atheists would agree with that, but I think we did a fine job showing them that they really have so very little to back them up.
Um, I do. Um, yeah, I totally. Sometimes I get just partnered, and I don't know how James makes his decisions. That I end up being on modern day debate, unless maybe I've only asked him just a little bit. It's just not typical for me to ask because um, a lot of his audience are atheists and they just don't care. I could make the best presentation and they just don't care.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it
and
does.
it's
It
like,
really doesn't matter.
yeah, I would only engage in that venue because I'm practicing so that I can reach out to Christians. And that is where my heart is that sometimes those atheist arguments, I don't try to minimize them because having gone through secular school myself, I know how powerful and it can be very persuasive. I'm not saying that it's right, but there are there are arguments that can be persuasive, and there's some that are still terrible, and still people are still persuaded by them, you know. And
I
um,
agree. I think their persuasion, though, the reason some of their arguments seem so persuasive is because people are forgetting what scientific method actually is. Uh, scientific method includes the process of falsification, and they gloss this point over, uh, and they won't apply. They're very fast to ask you to apply scientific method to God, but then when it comes to applying scientific method to their claims, they don't want to do that. If they were honest about it, they would say we can't. There's no way to falsify this, and that's the way it is with transitional fossils. That's the way it is with uh, the uh, the retrovirus markings and our genetics. That's the way it is with the morphology. You can. Uh, One of the fellows that we were debating, I watched his debate with another fellow, and the debate was on the flood, I believe it was. And he was telling him that you can't just look at something and make a claim without testing it and call that science. And yet, that's what they do many times. So, Christians who aren't as familiar with science, that don't realize that, hey, this can't even be falsified, they don't understand that. And so they're just persuaded and they believe that this is a fact as opposed to the truth that it's only a hypothesis that isn't even testable. And I think that's a big difference. I think that makes a big difference. When it comes right down to it, they just really don't have any solid structure to stand on. And every time I've asked somebody for the test, show me one transitional fossil whose DNA has been tested and it's proven that they are an intermediate between any two other fossils that you can find in a fossil record or even today. And they can't point to a single one. And I don't find that ironic. I find it uh, damning to the evolutionary theory. But that's just me. I'm sure there's others that would disagree.
Well, if I may share a screen um, here. This is from, are you familiar with Creation Ministries International?
Yeah, a little bit. I can't say very familiar.
There are there are there are three major creationist organizations in the United States: Creation Ministries International, and you can see it here in their title, Creation Ministries International. There is Answers in Genesis, which is the biggest one, and then kind of in between in size is Institute of Creation Research. So I want to point out they actually wrote some arguments that they think arguments we think creationists should not use, arguments we think creationists should not use. And um, let's see, let me get back to that. I'm sorry. And this was an argument that people had used before. Let's see, transitionals. I'm sorry, I lost the link. Hang on, let me try again.
That's okay.
So they said, let me just quote what they had to say. There are no transitional forms. Since there are candidates, even though they are highly dubious, it's better to avoid possible comebacks by saying instead, while Darwin predicted that the fossil record would show numerous transitional fossils, even 150 years later, all we have are a handful of disputable examples. And you know what? Um, oh, I'm sorry, Eric. As
Uh,
I as I said, I've actually served as a reviewer um, for both secular and creationist journals in science, and so and then also now I'm trying to teach people how to teach creationism. Um, you probably heard a little bit of my style of how I like to defend it, how
mm-hmm.
to defend creationism. Um, it what may be persuasive to certain people when they get to the university level, um, it can actually be pretty disturbing when you're not, even when you're not being indoctrinated. I have studied, I've actually looked at the genes of chimpanzees and humans, and oh my goodness, we really do look related. I mean, because uh, there are times some of our gene, the creationists don't talk about this, and I wish they would, because when you look at the genes, some genes of humans or sections of the DNA with chimpanzees, it looks identical. And granted, formally speaking, that you can't actually prove heredity, but you can't run away from the similarity, and that is um, difficult to run away from. Can you pardon me for a second? You know,
Sure.
yes, I was a reviewer on a minor secular paper and uh, a reviewer on ID papers and a creation paper. So I do that, let's see, I've reviewed two creation papers uh, and one ID paper. And I'm sad to say, I think some of them folded after I gave my review. I think it got withdrawn because I was trying to be, I was pointing out what I felt were weaknesses. And I said, I recommend for publication. And then it never came out because I don't like suppressing anyone's thought, but I guess my critiques were just a little too harsh. And I said I recommend publication, but here are some things. Here are my concerns, and yeah. So I've only reviewed one secular paper and maybe five creationist ID papers. So anyway, um, I was going back. I said we can't run away from the fact that we look like we're related, because if you look at all the creatures, um, they kind of group into nice families. Like you have the mammals, and then you have plants, and then within the mammals you have the placental and the marsupial, and then within the placental mammals um, you have uh, primates, and that looks like a family tree. So even if you can't prove it, I'll tell you the story of some guy. He was raised an old Earth creationist. He went to study medicine. He became a medical doctor. Once he was dissecting both cadavers of humans and apes, um, he said he became an atheist instantly. He said, we look so related. The similarity was too powerful. And I'm just saying, he eventually kind of came back half circle. He began to reject a lot of evolutionary theory afterward. Went from atheist to agnostic. And he wrote probably the foundational book for intelligent design. That was uh, Evolution, a Theory in Crisis by Michael Denton. So Denton ended up saying, I believe in common ancestry. I reject creationism, but I think evolutionary theory doesn't work. It's a theory in crisis. And a lot of people became creationists or ID proponents reading that book. That's the irony, is he never actually became a full blown creationist again, but he was so overwhelmed at the problems. So what I did in our debate was I said, let's accept universal common ancestry as a given, because I do see the similarities, but you're still going to have a lot of problems. And that's why I took that line of debate. Um,
You know why I believe that a very good argument is attacking, for instance, the transitional fossils? It's because of this. I don't think people consider, and this is one thing I try to get people to see. I don't think people consider how it is determined that a fossil is an intermediate form between two other groups of animals, like the Archaeopteryx, for instance, is said to be an intermediate form between theropod dinosaurs and modern birds. Uh, what the process that they actually go through isn't scientific at all. Um,
I would agree with you.
yeah,
But I'm just saying that sometimes, even when they don't, there's a lot that makes evolutionary theory persuasive that's not scientific.
yes,
They can appeal to intuition. And like I just said, like that guy, Michael Denton, he wasn't indoctrinated into evolutionary biology. He was just dissecting cadavers because he was being taught how to be a medical doctor. And it just overwhelmed him, the similarity.
yeah,
He said there had to be common descent. But when he actually studied the question more carefully, um, he's like, this is a theory in crisis. It doesn't, there, even if you assume common descent, it doesn't add up how all this came to be.
no, it doesn't.
Right.
And something that I like to point out is they dig a fossil out of the earth and they look at it. That's all they do. They look at it and they say, okay, no matter the rest of the morphology, if they hook onto one small tiny part of the morphology, and they'll make a whole lineage, a whole family tree, like they've done with the modern whale. If you look at Berkeley's evolution chart, it's from their Evolution 101 chart. They show how modern whales are related to the hippo, and then they have this whole lineage stuff of fossils going from the Pakicetus on down to the modern whale. Now, the first thing that they don't notice is in the very paragraph right above that picture showing these things, they said that they don't know whether any of these things are directly related or not. Yeah, that's the evogram right there. Now, if you read right above that, there's a paragraph, and they actually state they don't know if any of those things are directly related or not. But you see that Pakicetus at top, or I think it's the second one on the list there. The Pakicetus has a small spot on its skull near the eye that is similar to the little spot that's on the skull of a modern whale. And so because of that, and because of the fact that there's 5 bones in its little paws there, like we have 5 fingers, they say, of course, naturally, this little land mammal eventually evolved into a water mammal, water-living mammal, and eventually evolved into the whale. Now, that is so far-fetched based on that one tiny bit of morphology, but that's okay. If they want to believe that, if they want to hypothesize that, there's no crime in that. I'll allow that. But then, to look at this chart and claim this is a fact, this is how they evolved from the Pakicetus down to the whale. Well, there's no evidence whatsoever. There's no testing whatsoever that proves that the Pakicetus is in the lineage of the whale. They just looked at it. They saw that one small spot, and they put it clear up the line there, saying it was an ancestor to the modern whale. And no testing whatsoever. There's no DNA to test. There's no way. And that's why I'm a big fan of Dr. Colin Patterson, an evolutionist, not a believer, but he was honest. And he said there's no way to put these things to the test, which is why I didn't include transitional fossils in my book. Now, I don't say that ruins the entire theory of evolution. But what I am saying is that this is an example of how overblown their so-called evidence is. Their evidence is they looked at a bone and they put it on a chart down from the whale, and they said they were related, made the claim, and said this is a fact without a test at all. And if more people knew that that's how they come to the conclusion regarding absolutely every transitional fossil out there, and they say every fossil is transitional, this is what they do. So, in other words, they have hundreds of thousands or millions or possibly billions of examples of an untestable hypothesis instead of saying evolution is a fact. That's all I wish. I just wish they would acknowledge the truth. And just like saying, ERVs prove common descent. No, it just proves that our DNA stores things in similar places. That's the job of DNA. So why should we marvel at that and claim that that's proof of common ancestry? We can hypothesize common ancestry because of that, but then again, there's no way to put that to the test, that hypothesis. So that's all I try to set forth, is that if they want to believe in evolution, doesn't bother me at all. But why make the false claims? If they're standing on solid ground, why make the false claims, and why hide all these facts? Why run from the definition of species, for instance? It's not hard to say, okay, we can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Biologically speaking, that makes us the same species because that's the definition. It's like they need to change the definition of mammal just to include other animals. It would be the same ridiculous thing to change the definition of mammals so you could include a bird. You know, if they want to figure out different ways to classify things, that's fine. But why cheat? Why say this is inconvenient? It's not inconvenient uh, to classify things correctly. Like and getting back to the transitional fossils, though, an example of why uh, we should be aware of the process of calling something a transitional fossil. For many decades, possibly a century or more, they were saying that the dire wolf was the ancestor of wolves and dogs, and now we know that that's simply not true. We have the DNA of the dire wolf, and it's not related to wolves or dogs. And so, the fact that there's a similar morphology, and the fact they can pull it out of the ground and look at it and say, "Hey, it looks like this." The dire wolf is a perfect example of the fact that they're not related. That doesn't mean that they're related. And it's the same way with Neanderthal and Homo sapien. We obviously interbred, produced fertile offspring. By definition, we're the same species. So why try to duck that? We Christians can't duck things. We shouldn't. We should seek for truth and honesty. And I think that they know how perilous their position are. It really is many times, and that's why they don't want to be honest about these points. And in my opinion, most of them are simply not honest about these points.
Well, um, first off, I'd like to acknowledge Fran Marie. It's so rare that you do get to see me live, and it's also rare for me to get to see you live. And so, thank you for dropping in. So, I just wanted to say hi to Fran Marie. Um, Regarding your approach to debating this, it's certainly not the approach that I take because I really do think even if we can formally say they are not scientific, the intuitive argument is just very, very powerful. Um, and I'm just saying this sincerely as a creationist. Even when I was a creationist, I said, the guys do have a point that's hard to refute. And so I really don't go right after universal common ancestry, but I do go over the difficulty of evolving certain like proteins. And then you can go from proteins to more like complex organs and systems. Like even something as basic as having what do you need to make an animal? It needs to have a digestive tract. If you have a half-formed digestive tract, that's probably not going to work. The creature's dead.
Yes,
So um, I don't focus on arguments with speciation because even biologists do not agree on the definition of the species. Um, I don't go into too much of the philosophy that it's untestable as far as the transitionals being proven, because we do see a progression, and that's just intuitively. But where I have felt the strongest arguments are at the molecular and cell level, which is a lot harder to talk about. But if I'm addressing a university audience, a professional biologist, I'll talk, I'll address that because on some level um, it's actually easier to defend because the arguments they may be difficult, um, but it's clearer. So um, Schnoil says, my opinion differs a bit from Sal's. I think without a working mechanism, common ancestry is not feasible because it involves the arrival of a lot of new features. He says, I think without a working mechanism, common ancestry is not feasible because it involves the arrival of a lot of new features. Um,
that makes sense.
and he says, I'd say the hierarchy is very consistent with evolution, except some ridiculous examples of convergence, but not sufficient. Without a mechanism, evolution is dead in the water and only adjusts a story. The non-evolutionary complexity is evidence against common ancestry, in my opinion. because common ancestry involves the evolution of complexity. If I can address this for a moment, in mathematics, we have what is known as proof by contradiction, and we can lessen that calling it argument by contradiction. So just because I accept something as a hypothesis doesn't mean I actually believe it. So for the reader's benefit, uh, we'll just accept, let me show this here. Look at the Wikipedia article of proof by contradiction. And we can extend this to argument by contradiction. It says in logic and mathematics, proof by contradiction is a form of proof that establishes the truth or validity of a proposition by by showing that assuming the proposition to be false leads to a contradiction. Proof by contradiction is also known as indirect proof, proof by assuming the opposite, and reductio ad impossibile. I don't like the wording of this by showing that assuming the proposition. This is so poorly worded. It should be by showing this is just a terrible way of explaining it. Okay, they're better. Maybe they once upon a time had a better description of proof by contradiction. The classic example of proof by contradiction, maybe I should just show this proof, was in mathematics. When I say common ancestry, I assume it as a starting point. It doesn't mean I believe it. I'm setting up a proof by contradiction. So let me see, there was a famous one. All right, so I'm just going to read this. I'm sorry it's technical, but this is Schnoyle's a technical guy. He might appreciate this. The classic proof by contradiction from mathematics is the proof that the square root of 2 is irrational. If it were rational, it would be expressible as a fraction of a over b in lowest terms, where a and b are integers, at least one of which is odd. But if a over b is the square root of 2, then a squared plus 2b squared. Then a squared equals 2b squared. Therefore, a squared must be even, and that in turn implies that a is itself even. Now, because a and b is in lowest terms and a is even, b must be odd. This is tough. On the other hand, since a is even, then a squared is a multiple of 4. Then if a squared is a multiple of 4 and a squared equals 2 times b squared, then 2. Oh, I'm sorry. I should show this. Let me share my screen. I didn't realize you couldn't see what I was reading. Then 2b squared is a multiple of 4, and therefore b squared must be even, which means that b must be even as well. So if a is even, b is both odd and even, which is a contradiction. Therefore, the initial assumption that square root of 2 can be expressed as a fraction must be false. Okay, this was a really painful way to prove the truth. I mean, it is just not nice. And I'm trying to just point out here that we may not, I just like, don't underestimate how difficult it may be to prove evolution wrong. You might have to start out with an assumption you're going to reject. So I start out usually saying, let's just assume common ancestry is true. Look at all the miracles that have to happen along the way, like evolution of new major protein families, new organs, even new systems. The creature's going to be dead along the way. And it's like, all right, so common ancestry isn't, if you're going to assume universal common ancestry, you're going to need miracles to make it work. That's the last thing you want to do if you're going to say you have a naturalistic theory. So you can say universal common ancestry is true, but we need miracles to rescue it. And that's the way I go. That's the way I attack it. And so anyway, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Fran Marie. Even for me, who was a student of math, that was kind of miserable reading through that. I would have to spend a whole hour kind of just going through that. I apologize. So, Eric, um, I am shopping around for a debate partner for October 5th. I have a list of candidates, and you're one of them. I'd like to meet backstage with you. I'm going to end the broadcast, and then we could talk privately. Um, would that be okay with you?
Sure, sure.
All right, let me just close in prayer. Um, can I ask you? I mean, I'm sorry to just ask a. Um, I have. Hang on, I just saw a message here. I'll get to it, Peg. Just one moment there. Hang on. Um, I have a little bit of a probing question. A bit. It's just in love. It's just that you said that you nearly. They didn't expect you to come home from the hospital. So the question I'm going to ask is, I mean, what's your prognosis? What did the doctor said? I have a brother-in-law who has stage 4 COPD, and we just thank God for every day he's alive.
Amen.
So I
Well,
want to just, I'm asking you because I care, and maybe I could just offer a prayer for you before we say goodbye to the rest of the audience. Do you have anything to say on that?
I sure appreciate that. Um, I'm I'm grateful. I'm grateful actually for the help that I do have, but I'm also grateful that uh, I've experienced this because it's given me a new perspective on many things. When you think that you're about to die and you really believe it, uh, it it just makes you appreciate everything that much more. And it also made me realize that so much of what we do is vain, and we should spend more time on the more important things in life and letting people around us know that we love them and concentrating on spreading God's word. But as far as the prognosis is concerned, there's stage 4 COPD, and then I've got 8 different heart conditions. I guess each one of them are deadly in their own right. I've got an enlarged heart. I had what they called a widowmaker. One of the valves in my heart, the worst one, was really clogged and about to be shut down. I've got an enlarged heart, which I kind of tell the wife that's proof that I do love her more. but so, uh, but yeah, there's just suffice it to say there's 8 different heart conditions I'm being treated for, and then the breathing conditions. Um, but God has been, He keeps getting me up, giving me a new day to spend with my loved ones, and I'm grateful for that. But I appreciate anybody's prayers. But I don't want anybody to think that, you know, I'm taking this as anything but I thank God for my conditions, whatever they are, because I know He has a reason for them. And so if I have the healing offered to me from the Lord, I'll sure take it, and I'll appreciate it and run with it. But if not, that's okay too. I'll accept whatever He has for me. But I certainly appreciate the prayers.
Well, I've got I got a huge backlog of good comments here. So Sandy Pigeon, Dr. Sandy Pigeon, our resident retired Navy SEAL, sir. God bless you. I can't believe you're watching this channel, brother. Um, he's a good friend. I love the guy to death. We saw each other this past Sunday, and it was a lot of fun. So greetings. He recommends hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I've heard it works wonders. I'd like to do that myself, but it's expensive. Health insurance doesn't cover it. But I'd like to just say thank you, Sandy Pigeon, for helping to advocate for its use. I've seen people recover miraculously through it. Um, and there are a lot of non-standard cures that take a while to get widespread acceptance, and that's just the way it happens in medicine. I mean, it took a long time before people accepted that ulcers were caused by bacteria, and that was a big deal. So Ted Peg Molly asks, um, I have potential question for part 2 with Dr. Humphreys, and I'm not sure how to leave it. You can leave some of the comments in, go to the academic channel, Evidence Reasons Academy, and you can leave comments there. That's the better place to put that. And so let me get that out to you. And independent of whether Dr. Humphreys' ideas are right in terms of the alternative model, I think his criticism in general of the mainstream theory about the Earth's magnetic field, it needs to be more carefully studied, because the mainstream will admit they don't have answers for how our magnetic field works. And it could be decaying, and the civilization could be ending a lot faster than we think because the decay is so fast. So Ten Peg Molly says, I'm curious to know if you have ever heard of the YouTube channel Suspicious Observers. I'd love to hear a Christian with Dr. Humphrey's expertise respond to his theory. I'm not familiar with it. I'm sorry. But you can put the question. I mean, if I miss it, I'm sorry. And then Schnoil says the implication in the proof by contradiction would, in my opinion, also apply to common ancestry. While the contradiction is not derived from the nested hierarchy, it still contradicts the idea. Yes, I was forming a proof by contradiction when I say, let's assume that it's true. And then we'll see you need miracles. And then it's like, well, if you need miracles to make common ancestry work, how is that really fundamentally different than creationism? You just maybe have it in a different order than maybe a young Earth creationist, but that would fit well with progressive creationism. And so that's how I approach it. That's sort of how I've framed it, and people don't, I think sometimes they go straight for trying to go, a direct proof. So in mathematics, because that's one of my 5 degrees is in mathematics, and you either have direct proofs or you have these roundabout proofs. There are all these sorts of proofs, like proof by contrapositive, and kind of the direct step proofs, and proof by mathematical induction, and then there's lots of proofs by contradiction. And I used to know all the repertoire of it, and it's been a long time. So that I've done that. And people who are not, people who are familiar with it should recognize when I say argument by contradiction, what I'm trying to set up. Because sometimes a direct proof is tough to do, even in mathematics. Like trying to do that square root of 2 thing directly, you can't do it. As far as I know, there's not a direct proof. You have to go the back door. And some creationists like to argue the direct route, and it's like, formally it could be right, but I tried to do a different route. So let me say a prayer for everybody here, especially for Eric. And I want to thank you, sir. I salute you for your courage coming on Modern Day Debate. With your last breath, you were honoring your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and that was inspiring, sir. And that's why I wanted to have a chance to talk to you. I think you won't mind me sharing this. When you wrote to me, Eric, you said, why don't, if you'd like to talk sometime while I'm still here, we can. And I'm like, yeah, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I said, I'm going to regret it the rest of my life if I don't invite you as soon as possible to talk with you.
God bless you.
So let me offer a prayer for you right now, and for other people here in the side chat. Lord, I thank you for the miracles you've worked in so many lives. And it's a miracle that Eric is here. His last day should have been last year, and the doctors didn't think he was ever going home. That means they expected him to die and pass away in the hospital bed. But here he is on my channel, and here he was on the debate stage trying to defend your creation. I thank you for the witness of courage that he has offered. Please comfort him and strengthen him, and thank you for strengthening his voice And thank you that he honors you with his last breath, literally. And I lift up the needs in the side chat, whatever they are. I always lift up my dear sister Janet Duttridge, who is um, she's a widow and disabled. Comfort and protect and strengthen her. And Lord, there are other needs that I probably failed to mention. I just lift those up to you. Lord, help me in my debate with Aaron Raw and help me to find a suitable debate partner to debate him in a 2-by-2. And be with us this evening. Help us to be mindful of you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so all right, so I'll see you backstage. Um, um, so take care, everyone, and God bless you. Yes, October 5th, I'm scheduled to debate Aaron Raw, but I need a debate partner. And so Eric is a potential one. I cleared it with James. I have some others on the list, and I'm going to talk to Eric backstage about that. Take care, everyone, and God bless you.